Welcome to the Traveling Professors. I'm Professor Bob.
And I'm Professor Sheri.
And together we are
the Traveling Professors.
Welcome to show number 82 of the Traveling Professors. Today we're going to take our cruise to Mykonos and do a walking tour of the island. Now this is just like when we went to Santorini. This was the part of the tour that we took instead of our day or two in Egypt. So we're coming in on the cruise ship, we'll get on to a bus, and then they will give us a quick tour of the island. And let me assure you that the best thing about Mykonos is the nightlife, which we did not get to see. So let's get started. Here's our cruise map showing Sheri and I, and here's where we're headed, right here to Mykonos. And we were really kind of glad to go to Mykonos, just like Santorini. It has a really neat archaeological site to it, the island of Delos. And just like Santorini on our cruise, we arrived there on the day it was closed. Or Santorini, they had an accident and it was closed. So our two alternate islands, we didn't get to see the historical section that would have been really neat. So of course we'll have to go back. Now if you look at a map of the whole region of the Aegean, you see the Cycladic Islands, and Delos sits, and Mykonos sits right in the middle of it. They kind of revolve around the island, making it the center. So here we are arriving into the port at Mykonos, the main ferry port. And here's a view of Hora, which is the main city on Mykonos. And so we're getting off our cruise ship. We were supposed to have a nice tour of the whole island. So we meet our guide. We then get on our bus. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the bus from the port to what is known as Ionis Beach. So on the map, here's where we started out, and we'll be actually going over the upper side of the city. And then we'll go down through this little peninsula-like area to the little beach here, Ionis Beach, and you can see Delos over here. So here's some of the countryside as we're heading towards the peninsula to go over to the other side of the island and the beach. And then here you can kind of see over the tops of the city, looking out to the sea. And then here's, as we come down, this is one side of the sea coming in with a little peninsula in between. And there's a little shot of the other side looking out and around. And then this is the biggest house, or one of the two biggest houses on the island, one of the clothing designers' homes. And then here we are getting down closer to the shoreline, and this is the other side of the peninsula. And then here we are looking over to some of the houses along the edge, and then as we get closer to Ionis Beach, we see some of the ships, we see some of the donkeys in the region. There's a little closer view of the animals, and then some of the fishing ships. Now, you know, Mykonos was a home for pirates in its early days, and maybe a little bit of piracy also in the 1600s as well. We finally get down to the area where Ionis Beach is located, a little church there, and we can then get out and walk around, and it's a little rocky beach in this particular area, but that did not faze the ladies in our group. So Sheri, of course, is one of the first ones to head down to get her feet wet on the beach, and then my daughter, Laura, then comes down and joins her as well. So they had a nice time and nobody got washed out to sea. That was our first initial part of our little tour. Now, we're not going to get to see Delos, but again, here's the chart that I showed you before. So the island is off over in this area. This was our best view of it that we had while we were there at Ionis Beach. And then here's a view of what you'll see next time I do a Greek show, is that we spent a whole day on Delos when we went back a second time. And to give you a little brief history of the island of Delos, it's been inhabited since 3000 BCE, initially by what are known as Carian pirates. Then it became a center of the cult of Apollo and Artemis from 900 BCE to 100 AD. During the Persian Wars, the Delian League actually met here. But the biggest thing is in 166 BCE, the Romans converted Delos into a free port and ran all of the Roman trade in the Aegean through this island. The center of slave trade, actually ruined the island of Rhodes' trade as well. And the archaeological digs on this island began about 1872. So we returned to our bus and headed for our next section. We're going to be going from Ionis Beach to Kalafatis Beach. So you can see the route here. We'll be retracing some of our steps, then going right through the heart of the island of Mykonos down to the Kalafatis Beach here. There are all sorts of beaches all over this island. The two most famous are Paradise and Super Paradise, which are on up the coastline. That's where all the real action takes place, and they're pretty wild. just look at some YouTube videos of those beaches. But this is early in the morning. It's before noon, so most of the revelers are probably still sleeping off their hangover from the night before. So we are leaving from where we were located, and we're going across the peninsula. There's a shot looking at the city over the entrance. There's the other side of the peninsula. And then we go through the heart of the island, seeing towns, villages. There's an airport on the island. Some of it is pretty stark. We were there in May, I believe, May or June. And then here we start coming down to the beach area. You'll see these churches everywhere. Now, sometimes it is actually a church, but a lot of people, a lot of Greek Orthodox people on the island, and on many of the Greek islands, have their own private chapel for their patron saint. But we're heading down towards the beach, and what you see in the distance is what is known as Aphrodite's breasts. So as we come into this particular beach, instead of having mules and donkeys, we have horses. So there's our bus with Aphrodite's breasts in the background, and oh, look at this beach. It is just gorgeous. There's nobody on it yet because it's not technically open. And then here is the clubhouse and everything else where you can rent your cabanas and boats and all sorts of stuff. There's a nice view down the beach where people can lay out, have a nice swim in the area. This is one of the boats that was out there for hire. There were several other people that went out, not in our group, but they had come out with snorkeling equipment, and we're going to go out and do some snorkeling. Very, very beautiful. And my understanding is that all the beaches on this side of the island are very much like this, and it's a pretty interesting atmosphere. So now we're going to head off to a monastery. Now our next stop on our quick tour of Mykonos is Pangia Turlani. This is going to be where there's a monastery. So here is our map. So we go from the beaches up to the little circle area, and there is the monastery as we come into the town square, and there's the full sign, Pangia Turlani Monastery. And there's our guide giving us some information. There are some souvenir shops and whatever here, but there's really not a lot of time. As you can tell, this is a pretty hurried thing, but we will have time to wander around in Hora, the main city, at the end. I thought the bank was a rather interesting size for a small community. And of course the play area for the kids was a lot larger than the little local bank. And here's a beautiful view of the nice little town square, which you found. And then this is the entrance to the monastery. We were told that we were allowed to take pictures in the church. Normally they don't allow you in the Orthodox Church to take pictures, but that had been arranged. So there's the entrance. And of course you look up and the beautiful bells on the tower. And I believe that's bougainvillea, really blooming everywhere. And we found ourselves a little cat, the little local monastery cat. Actually, there were several of the monks out, and you could ask them questions if you wanted to, and one of them was playing with the cat, so I opted to play with the monastery cat. And then we went into the church, and you can see the iconostasis up in the front. The altar is behind the iconostasis, and the chandeliers hanging down. And then you see some of the detail of the iconostasis, presenting all the saints. And then here we have something that you find frequently in Orthodox churches of island communities. This silver sailing ship, which is part of the candelabra, and that's an indication that a family member had been at sea in a storm and had survived, and this was in thanksgiving for that survival. And then here's two shots of the front of the iconostasis. You see the central one on the right hand side showing the doors on the inside. Now during the service that is opened, and then this is a little more detail of the iconostasis. So after wandering through the village and getting a little something to snack on, we then return to our bus for our final trip into Hora, which is the main city on Mykonos. So here we go. We're leaving the circled area, which is where the monastery was, and we're going back to Hora. And when we come in, we were up on the top part of the island looking down, so you can see the Aegean Sea as we come back into the city, and we go all the way down to the inner port. Now, our ship had come into the commercial port. There is a central port on the main part of the town that has smaller ships and skiffs and other things. So we come in at where the bus station is, where they park the bus. And then our guide begins a walking tour over this whole area. So here's one of the boats that was in dock at the time, and then taking a move from the left to the right, there's the next shot of the harbor, and then all the way over to the other side, that comes in where the jetty is, and the ships come into the inner harbor. So it's a very beautiful little location here. There's several beach areas where you can wade in and swim around if you want to. Then we come around to the other side of the harbor. Here's one of the little local churches. And you see this pelican here. Pelican is part of the island's lore. It was a good luck charm, and when the original ones passed away, I believe Jackie Kennedy Onassis had some that were brought in, so they still have them on the island, and they basically do whatever they want to. And then look at the wonderful streets. Now you can get lost here pretty easily, so you want to keep track of where you're headed. Although most of these streets will eventually take you down to the harbor. And as we're walking through this little town, we run across one of the pelicans just strolling around. They're pretty used to people. And then here we come to one of the main churches. This is actually 4 chapels that were blended together, and it's one of the landmarks on the island. We didn't get to go in it, we just walked by it. When Sheri and I come back to Mykonos, we're here for 3 days, so it takes a while to see the city. Actually, we spent a day and a half just looking at the sights in the city and a full day on Delos. So you'll get more interesting information on these when we get to that part. And then here we are continuing to walk up on, you can see this isn't our ship. This is one of the other ships. There were multiple cruise ships in here as well because, again, just like Santorini, this was an added option because we couldn't go to Egypt. Now we're moving along what's referred to as Little Venice. We have all of these homes right on the sea. This is where they used to have ship's captains would own them. And we're walking up to the windmills that you see there. And you'll find these type of windmills on all the islands. Most of them are no longer working. Produce flour. They ground wheat in the flour. And of course these islands, they get more than 200 and some days of strong wind in an average year. So they're a good location for these. I think there's still 10 of them on the island. These were the highest ones. And then looking back into the area that the water is, there's the Little Venice. There's a legend that the reason that you have ship's captains along here is in the piracy days in the 1600s, you could bring your ships in and there were secret storage doors that you could open to unload your loot really quick into the house and then sail off. Here's a little closer view. A lot of these homes have been turned into B&Bs and they have lots of restaurants and things in them, but it's really a really beautiful section. And then again, walking through the city with some more of the flowers blooming. And there's the pelican giving his best shot for the tourists. And then we stopped in the harbor and had lunch. Now, there's all sorts of different restaurants across this harbor area, this inner harbor. And we selected one that had some seating. And this is our view from where we were eating. So it's a pretty nice location to have lunch. And as you can see, they have a nice seafood lunch. This was just exquisite. Now, when Sheri and I come back, we ate at a restaurant that was actually a pizza place. And they served a seafood pizza that was beyond description. Hungry for it just talking about it at this point. Here we are walking back to our bus. And you can see the ferry, you can see the cruise ship. And then here we are back at the bus station. And I didn't realize it at this time, because we didn't know when we were coming back. But when we came back, I believe this is the building that we spent 3 days visiting the area, and it was quite stunning. There's our bus. So we got back on our bus. Takes us back to the harbor. There's the regular ferries, and there's our ship. And you can see it's a pretty extensive, larger harbor region. And we get back to the ship and then board without too much trouble. And then the tug comes to help us out a little bit. And we say goodbye to Mykonos. So there's the shot of the city as we're leaving, and there's the shot of desolate Delos as we're going by as well. And the sun begins to set because on this cruise we left from Mykonos and our next stop will be Dubrovnik in Croatia. So in reality we're going to King's Landing. Sheri and I hope you enjoyed the tour. Please come by our YouTube channel at Bob Packett, and please subscribe and leave some comments. Thank you very much. I've been doing podcasting on history for over 15 years. I've got over 4,000 shows, and I've done CDs, which of course can be sent out as USBs. So if you would really like to get more on history for free, then come by my website, as you see here, historyaccordingtobob.com, and see what's there. So thank you very much again.